Welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for joining us for another segment. We're going to have a conversation with Katie Morton. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and author of the book, Are You Okay? A Guide to Caring for Your Mental Health. She's joining us to talk about social media and the effect that social media can have on someone's mental health. Welcome to the program, Katie Morton. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Now, I mentioned that you're a licensed marriage and family therapist. Give our listeners a bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, I have been on YouTube. I specialize really in self-injury and eating disorders. That's just part of, when I was gathering my hours towards licensure, that was kind of the specialization I found myself in. Really rewarding, wonderful work. And about 8.5 years ago, I started on YouTube, just trying to educate first about eating disorders because that was what I was working in the field in, and nothing happens in a vacuum. So as the questions came in, my, videos and what I would talk about expanded exponentially.
So today we're going to talk about social media, and I mean, you're a YouTuber. Are you active on all social media? Is that?
Yeah, I am pretty much. I mean, I answer questions I answer questions on as many platforms as possible. And yeah, I'm even trying out TikTok. So pray for me. We'll see how that works.
Well, there's an 81-year-old guy that's having a bit of success on TikTok as we speak.
Yes. See, you never know. And you can educate anywhere. So
Absolutely. Well, social media, it's everywhere. There's no escaping it unless you live in a vacuum or just decide to sanitize your life of all gadgets and internet and everything else, which, who's really going to do that? So, are we talking about social media, overall having an impact on mental health? Are we talking about the most popular of social media platforms?
I think it's social media overall, to be honest. If you think about the way that social media came about, I'm 36, so I remember when I was in college when Facebook first started and you had to have an educational, like a .edu email in order to access it. I remember those days, and I think because it's grown so quickly and there's so many platforms and so many ways to engage, for better, for worse, I think that we haven't taken the time or even had the time to properly understand how it can affect us. Do you know what I mean? Because
absolutely,
if for instance, when I grew up, I'll speak for myself, I guess. When I grew up, my circle of friends and circle of influence were people from my own hometown whose parents probably worked in a similar field to my parents. There might be a little discrepancies in how much people's families made, but we had the same influences around us, access to the same TV shows. It was a pretty small, little influential circle that I was in. Now, you get on social media and you can be, let's say you live in rural Washington State where I grew up, and most people are kind of blue collar workers. Then I have access and a way to look into people's lives who live in a completely different sphere from me, which can be great for education, understanding different cultures and things like that. But it can be difficult when it comes to comparison when we're in our developing years.
So basically, with social media, you have the opportunity and the means to be influential worldwide, but also be influenced on a worldwide basis as opposed to that microcosm of your own hometown.
Exactly. And I think it's good, but like everything, there's two sides to every coin. So there are positives, but there are also some negatives and things that we should definitely look out for.
Now, when we're talking about social media affecting our mental health, are we talking about an addiction to interacting on social media, or are we talking about the influences of outside influences that will come from social media, being exposed to things that you wouldn't normally be exposed to, someone else's, for lack of a better term, toxic ideology influencing you and yours?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think that I guess the best way I can describe it is that it's being influenced, definitely. And it's also, I don't know if it's necessarily an addiction. That's like, addiction's not technically my specialty, but I can see the conversations around, let's say, like FOMO, and the fact that we feel like we need to always be accessible, always be watching people's content, double clicking it to like it, things like that. We need to be engaging. But I think the biggest component that I see online, and the biggest issue really, is the comparison factor. And one of my favorite quotes is, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I think that for all ages, I don't actually think this is just children or teenagers. I think for all of us, getting online and looking out at someone else's experience or situation, and then looking back at ours as we sit in our pajamas on our couch, scrolling through, thinking, why is my life not as great as that? And not to mention, something that I'm working on right now is the shared trauma of social media. I mean, the fact that we have video content that we can access of someone shooting up a school, or getting into a theater and shooting people. I remember not too long ago, someone live streamed themselves driving recklessly with their sister in the car who was younger. They were drunk. They were live streaming this, and they got in a horrific accident. And so I think that in a way, this access, it gives us more opportunity to reach people in a good way, educate about important things, connect with people to be reminded we're not alone and how we feel isn't strange. But then on the dark side of it, it's like, how much sharing is too much sharing, and how can we use social media as more of a tool for good versus potentially an addiction, that can cause pain and lead to more suffering.
You spoke about the situation when you were growing up. When I was growing up, I'm going to age myself, date myself. Magazines, television were those mediums that caused us to look at ourselves and say, "Oh, I wish I had that," or "I wish I was there."
Yeah.
Is social media making us feel lower about ourselves because we have more access to more comparisons, or is it because we're accessing and being influenced by those comparisons, or making those comparisons at a very, very much earlier age?
I think it's both, because like I said, I don't think this only just affects children. Like, people my age, or probably your age, any age, are affected. So I do think we don't really know the full scope or ramifications of social media that it's going to have on our children, right? The younger generations, it hasn't been out for that long. I mean, YouTube has been around for, 12 years or so. And that's really the beginning. And, Facebook, I was talking about being in college. So that would have been 2006 or no, 2003, 2002. So we don't really know how it's going to play out. And I would be interested to see that, because I don't know if you've heard this too, but Dr. Drew talks a lot about how he thinks that we will talk about social media in the same way we talk about smoking, how we're like, wow, we thought it was fine and benign, but now we have all this information and all this research, and we know how dangerous it is. And I personally don't think it's the same as smoking. I don't think that's a great correlation, but I think it could be akin to, sugary soda. And, we didn't think it was that big of a deal to drink that and do that. And now we're like, well, you probably should limit the amount of sugar intake you have every day, just be reasonable with yourself. And I think that that's kind of social media, as we don't have that information yet, and we're engaging with it, but it affects all of us. I mean, I'll be honest, I mute and unfollow people easily because of how it affects me. And that's on me, right? That's my responsibility. If I'm watching a certain kind of content, and I'm allowing it and allowing my thoughts to help, work towards me believing that my life isn't good enough and I'm not good enough, or, whatever it is, then it's up to me to change that. And so I try to check in with myself after digesting some social media, whether it's Instagram or YouTube. And if it's not working towards me feeling better and my goals for my life, then I don't do that anymore. And I think we should all be a little more mindful about that.
I'd like our listeners to have the opportunity to get a copy of your book, Are You Okay? A Guide to Caring for Your Mental Health. I believe it came out last year, or I think, was it last year it came out?
Yeah, it was December of 2018. So just the very end of, not quite 2 years ago, but a year and a little bit ago.
Okay. Great. Where can we get a copy of that book online, and a website where we can go and learn more about the mental health aspects of social media?
Yeah, they can find my book anywhere books are sold. There's the audio book if you prefer that. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places. And then as far as more information, my YouTube channel is a great resource for anything mental health related. And it's just my name. You can just go to youtube.com/Katie Morton. That's KATIMORTON.
Katie, thank you so much for joining us here on Health Professional Radio this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Katie Morton, licensed marriage and family therapist, talking about the social media and how it affects mental health. She's also the author of Are You Okay? A Guide to Caring for Your Mental Health. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.